Jake, I know you've done a lot of work looking at what John Johnson does on the field. How do you feel about this signing and how important it can be to that Browns defense?
Yeah, I probably watched too much last night. I was up really late looking at it. I mean, he's a lot of fun. I haven't seen a safety or really a defensive player like this in a while. I mean, we get spoiled with watching Myles Garrett and some of the things that he's able to do that we take for granted when we're watching it, or sometimes people complain about where it's like, watch some of the other guys in the league before you complain about this stuff. Well, it's like with John Johnson, he's doing so many things, and I'm just like sitting in my chair, kind of trying to figure out what to point out because there's so many things. I kind of view him as a Tyrann Mathieu light. Like he does a lot of similar things. Um, he will play all over the field. He'll play deep half coverage, deep quarters coverage, and two high safety looks. He occasionally will play that center fielder single high and those sorts of looks, whether that's cover one or cover three. He'll do that. He'll come down in the box and play off the edge and run support. He will play slot corner. He's played wide corner on tight ends before. He's played in the box as a linebacker because, as Brandon Staley, the defensive coordinator of the Rams last year, now the Chargers head coach, noted that they had some issues at their linebacker room, which kind of sounds familiar to what Cleveland is currently kind of structuring their defense around. And he was able to play in the box for them. So it's literally is a true Mike or Will on certain occasions. So he can do everything, and he can do it all well. He's a run support guy who can get down in there, mixes it up near the line of scrimmage. He is a guy who can cover the slot, curl flat to hook, play zone coverage, and feel good about it. He can play tight ends. The thing he'll do really well, hopefully, that we see and feel an impact right away. It feels like the Browns have not covered tight ends since like 1984. Well, they certainly have a guy here who has proven to cover tight ends. Through his career, if you look at his 4 years, has given George Kittle and San Francisco 49ers some fits at times. He's effective. I mean, he's just a really good football player. He's not an overwhelmingly great athlete. I think he clocked a 4.61, and his shuttle times were pretty solid, but not great. So that's why he slipped into the third round. He was picked 91 in 2017. Some of those concerns, but like when you watch him play, he plays fast. Not a fast straight line guy or a guy who can really burst in and make those unbelievable twitchy hip flip plays, but he's so smart. He's so cerebral about the way he approaches the position, and has made note of this when he started to really take off in 2018, how he changed his approach to studying film and really started to get out in front of what teams are trying to do defensively, to the point that he grew into becoming a captain. And as you noted, Peter Schrager noted there, a leader for the Rams, a leader in the community. He was their mic'd up guy. He was the guy who was the voice of that defense. A defense with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, two dynamic personalities in a defense. And he was the voice. He was the leader. He was the guy for them, man. And he was like Joe Thomas has noted, and people have noted, myself too, that he was the guy who wore the green dot. And it's not as uncommon as it used to be to see a safety be the communicator between the coach and his teammates, but especially for Johnson, man, if you get a chance, I wrote on him. I put up a ton of different things he does well in terms of coverage and run support and open field tackling and all of the things he can do. But just watch the way he communicates, the way his teammates respect him, the way he's leading where people need to be on the field pre-snap. He's the communicator. He's the guy making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. And there's a mic'd up. He had a couple different mic'd ups this last year where he was with against Washington and against Green Bay in the playoffs, and just fascinating to hear him talk and how he goes about things and the way he's calling out things ahead of time. Just one of the true game-changing players the Browns could have gotten free agency. I've been preaching all offseason that I know they need to upgrade the edge opposite Myles, and they need some long-term interior defensive line pieces, but the coverage is such a disaster coming into this that they had to address it. They just had to go out and get somebody in the secondary that they were going to feel good about in a bunch of different positions, and a bunch of flexibility that he can grant a defense is really, really important. So they truly they kicked this one out of the park, man. Like, you could not have gotten a better player for them. He's going to play this year at 26. They get him for 3 years. There's actually an out after his second year in case things go south, which we hope that doesn't happen, but there is. So it's a well-structured contract, but you get him for his age, 26, 27, 28 prime years, and have a chance to maybe bring him back if things go as well as you plan. And seems like John Johnson's really excited to be coming to Cleveland, and he's the perfect yin to Myles Yang in terms of up front, where Myles is sort of that humble, internal leader. He kind of keeps everything tight to the chest. He doesn't really let out a ton of vocal emotion. John Johnson is the opposite of that, where he is a vocal guy. He's leading through not only example but voice and some of those things that not all guys are comfortable doing. So it's really exciting to see how he meshes with Myles between leadership in the front four and the back four. So I just can't wait to see him. It was such a fun breakdown. And the Browns have a guy, so often we see the Jamal Adams, we see Tyrann Mathieu. We see, in division, Minkah Fitzpatrick. We saw Ed Reed for all those years, all that dynamic safety play, Troy Polamalu. It'd be fun to have a guy like this with the Browns who can really change games at that position, kind of roaming, doing a bunch of different things, using his instincts that we see so many times, but we haven't seen a ton of with Cleveland. So it should be a lot of fun. And as it sits right now, they could not have signed a better player for what they needed in this on this defense.
The other thing it does is we've continually heard Joe Woods wants to play 3 safeties a lot, which usually means 2 linebackers. He fits that mold, correct? He gives them what Joe Woods is looking to do. It's kind of a Joe Woods signing, if you will, which if you're Andrew Berry, that's what you want to do. Give your guys what the pieces they need to do what they do.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Joe Woods wants to play 3 safeties, but ultimately just wants to play his best 11 players. So if those guys are safeties, or if one guy's a nickel, if one guy's if they have 3 great linebackers, they would find a way to put those linebackers on the field. Like he just wants good football players. I think sometimes we can pigeonhole, well, you need 3 safeties and 2 corners and 2 linebackers and 40. He wants his best 11. So like if that means moving John Johnson down to play linebacker in situations, he'll do it. If that means getting another corner on the field because they sign a good corner, they draft a corner who proves to be a player that they got to get on the football field, they'll do it. So don't, and this isn't necessarily lecturing you or anybody, saying it's just like they're going to play their best 11 players. So if John is labeled as a safety, don't necessarily view him that way. That guy's like, he's a hybrid, like the NBA has gone to just not a small forward, but a wing. Like he's a defensive back he's just a defensive back. He can do everything back there. So he'll do that. The same with Grant Delpit. If Grant Delpit's healthy, he can do a bunch of different things. And the same with Ronnie Harrison, who can do a bunch of different things. And then if you go sign or draft a slot guy that can play in there, they can do a bunch of different stuff too. So you want as many pieces on your chessboard that can do different things to cover Lamar Jackson, to cover, how do we cover the Bills, Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and all these fast threats that they have, and Josh Allen, how do we maintain him? Or how do we stop this flat motion craziness Pittsburgh's throwing at us? Or how do we stop Kansas City's, Mecole Hardman and Tyreek Hill? These guys have so much speed. How do we stop these guys? Well, you have it set up to have a bunch of different skill sets that allow you to do that. And they have to raise the basement. So like what I talk about often is the coverage was so bad last year that even though the Browns had a pretty solid pass rush, it didn't matter because their pass coverage was so bad that it ultimately didn't allow them to get home. It just was easy dink and dunk throws for quarterbacks so often that it didn't matter. You have to raise the basement of your defense, and raising the basement means bringing in players that allow you to play average pass rush. The Bucs didn't have a great pass or a great coverage group. They had just a bunch of guys that were average to above average to approaching that good level that allowed their pass rush to get home. So you have to you try to have a dynamic force one way or the other, either great coverage or great pass rush, but the other side of it, whatever you're great at, the other side of it has to be average to allow that part of your team to be effective. So they need to be able to play a bunch of different coverages, a bunch of different looks in the secondary, because that confuses quarterbacks, causes them to hold on to the football a split second or two longer, and that allows 95 to get home. That allows Sheldon Richardson to get home, and that allows ultimately whoever they sign and play a majority of the time opposite of Miles to get home. And that's where you say, okay, they got a bunch of sacks. Well, why did they get a bunch of sacks? Because they covered really well. So those two counterbalance each other. I think the Browns are going to probably try to invest as much as they can in a really deep draft too at the secondary position.